Scripture were not the inerrant word of authority from the Creator of heaven and earth and sex, then we would have no reason to object to the teachings of the gender ideology, but rather we would have to say, as they want us to say, let everyone do whatever they want. But we cannot do it. We cannot simply give in to the tremendous pressure that the LGBTQ community is exerting in education, government, entertainment and culture, because we have an authority over us that is the absolute norm of good and bad, of truth, and from lies, the blessed word of the Lord of hosts. So it is necessary to teach the truth of Scripture that counterpoints the teachings of gender ideology. But well, we have been mentioning this terminology and I think we need to clarify it a little so that we understand what we are talking about. In a simple and succinct way, we can say that gender ideology is a theory that is taken as truth, although it does not even have a scientific basis, that our behaviors as men and women, as well as the practice of our sexuality, are mere social and cultural constructions 770 that have been imposed on us, which have nothing to do with biology, anatomy or genetics. And it is proposed that the person can be sexually what he wants or feels he is without imposition from anyone. Simply put, your biological sex is not the same as your gender. You can be biologically and physically a male, but if you do not perceive yourself as such, then you will be what you identify with. Biological sex does not determine gender. That is to say, although biologically, anatomically, genetically you are identified with one of the two sexes, man or woman, you can define yourself as you please, because, according to this, no one has the right to impose on you how you will behave sexually. And they want to force us to have everyone recognize you with that gender identity and treat you that way. From all this a whole series of classifications is derived that are actually infinite: heterosexual man or woman, homosexual man or woman, bisexual, transsexual, agender, fluid gender and even transspecies. These ideas have filtered down, sometimes slowly, and sometimes blatantly, through politics, education, entertainment, etc. The other day I saw a free market commercial that showed people moving around that you couldn't tell if they were men or women, and when they met they seemed to exchange their clothes. The one who looked more like a man kept the clothes of the one who looked more like a woman. And at the end of the commercial he says, "Today we celebrate a world without labels. That is why we launched the genderless fashion category." Here we see this lie repeated in creative ways. There are no categories. Gender is something we decide. Our gender is not defined at birth, it is something that we can build to our liking and measure. But we have to go to the light of the word of the Lord and see if God has granted us this supposed right to assign ourselves the gender we want or to practice our sexuality as we please. We have to go to the beginning of all things. And the first verse of Scripture in Genesis 1:1 says, "God in the beginning created the heavens and the earth." This is how the history of the universe begins. Start with God. He has existed forever, he has no beginning or end, but in a moment that was the beginning of history, he created the heavens and the earth. The fact that God created everything in heaven and earth, including us as a human race, establishes a very important distinction that we must never remove from the center of this entire discussion. God is the creator and we are his creation. The fact of having been created establishes that the Creator is the one who invented, established and arranged the parameters of his creation. The Creator is the one who defines us, not ourselves. The Creator is the one who has the right over his creation. Creation does not have the right to define itself or decide what it wants to be. Its essence is defined by the Creator. 771 And throughout the Bible that distinction between the Creator and the creation is maintained. God never cedes his rights to anyone. He is the King whose will must be done in heaven and on earth, because everything was created by him and by his power subsists. God is the creator and inventor of humanity, and he made us beings with well-defined sexes and leaving nothing in ambiguity, or for human inventiveness or imagination. Since we have a creator and we are his creation, we are subject to the Creator's original plan and design for its creation. But Genesis 1 says something else. In Genesis 1:26 it says, "Let us make human beings in our image and likeness. May he have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, on domestic animals, on wild animals, and on all creeping things that crawl on the ground." This puts things more into perspective. What is the human being? He is the image of God. He was made in the image and likeness of God. Other beings were created according to their kind, but the human being was made with God as a model. And he was placed on the earth to administer it, having direction over all beings on the earth. The very fact of having been created in the image of God tells us, from the outset, two things. 1. That we cannot understand our life and identity apart from God. We are image, we are not the original. This morning before coming here you probably stood in front of the mirror. I know this, because they are all very handsome. Imagine that image that you saw, reflected in the mirror, wanted to rebel and was determined to stay there regardless of whether you were standing in front of the mirror or not. This is unimaginable. The very existence of that image depends on you standing in front of the mirror. This is our life. Without our connection with God, our existence has no meaning. If we do not see ourselves in our inescapable connection with our Creator, everything is distorted, everything is distorted. We are not an end in ourselves. We are an image, we were created to reflect someone else. The problem today is that human beings want to understand themselves apart from God or without being in that connection with God. This is as absurd as saying that the mirror image wants to have an existence independent of the original of whom it is a reflection. We cannot have an existence independent of the Creator whose image we are. But there is a second implication of the fact of having been created in the image of God, and that is that, as an image, it is not up to us to define ourselves. Nor do we construct or deconstruct our identity, because we are not an end in ourselves, but we are image of someone else. The original, whose image we are, marks who we are and how we should be. That dependence on God will always be implicit in our existence. He is 772. The one who marks what is true or false. He marks who we are and what our purpose is. This is not within our range of decision. That is why gender ideology is an open rebellion against the design of the Creator of whom we are images. We are saying to God, we do not agree with your design, it is homophobic, it is retrograde, it is for ignorant people, we don't care what you say. We want to be what we want to be. It is a frank rebellion against the Creator of the universe. In this type of ideologies, the words of the serpent in Genesis 3:4-5 resonate. But the serpent said to the woman, it is not true, they are not going to die. God knows very well that when you eat from that tree, your eyes will be opened and you will become like God, knowing good and evil. The idea of not having to depend on God or His design, but rather live independently of the Creator, is the same lie with which Satan continues to seduce the world. The same lie that says, God is lying to you. Your design of Him is not perfect. On the contrary, God does not want you to be independent in such a way that you define what He is good and what He is bad, because He is afraid that you will overthrow Him from His dictatorship over you. God is this dictator who wants to keep you subjugated and torment you by depriving you of happiness. How contrary is this to God's true purpose in establishing His design for our lives in Scripture. In Deuteronomy 5:29 we hear the heart of God with these words. May His heart always be ready to fear me and to keep all my commandments, so that it may always go well with them and their children. The Lord is no petty dictator, He is no spoilsport, but He has established His design and commandments for our good. When we are aligned with His truth, our lives have meaning because we were made for God. When we live according to His design, we find true happiness. But, due to the entry of sin into the world, now what is good and what is for our good seems like imposition, dictatorship, oppression. Sin clouds our view of reality to the point that we call good, bad, and bad, good. This is the reality of the human heart that rebels against the authority of the King of creation. But Genesis 1 brings us a third clear teaching regarding our topic, and we find this in Genesis 1:27. And God created the human being in His image, He created it in the image of God. Male and female He created them. Here everything we have been saying is summarized. We have the God who creates, establishing the distinction between the Creator and His creation. We also have the human being created in the image of God, establishing the role, identity and 773. Dependence of the human being on his Creator.